Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. I'm back in the country, back in front of the blue wall. Pretty much actually the only proof, if it really was proof, that I've been away with Spurs on tour, is that last video I did where I could have been in any prison cell anywhere. It was not the most flattering angle of the hotel I was in with the Mind the Step behind me. I would have loved to have done another video out there, but what a tour. That was summer tours of Spurs are always relentless. There's just a ridiculous amount of stuff. To be honest, you spend about 65% of your time in your hotel room writing articles anyway, because of the massive stuff that's happening and going on and also happening in the backgrounds. The 2019 one, I remember we're in Singapore and Shanghai, Pochettino's last pre-season with the club. That ended up being a bit of a mad, manic one and very frustrated Pochettino. This one beat it by a country mile. Oh my goodness. There was so much went on. I really do apologise if I'm so knackered and jet lagged. I flew in this morning back from Singapore via Dubai on a really long connecting flight. So I apologise if I end up making no sense as this video goes on, because that's pretty much where my head's at with jet lag, lack of sleep, all of the above. And I also apologise if it goes on. That's if I don't fall asleep or you guys don't fall asleep during it, because there's so much to talk about. We've got the tour itself, we've got Postecoglou, we've got the players, we've got the Harry Kane situation, we've got the Joe Lewis situation. Honestly, if you just thought it couldn't get weirder, suddenly all of that kicked off in the middle of the night for us. I think it was late at night here. We were all fast asleep in Singapore as it was breaking. It's utter madness. And no centre-backs, just to chuck in a little bit of that as well. It was crazy, honestly. Pretty much the only people, other than that video, which could have, let's be honest, been a B&B in Bognor, quite frankly, the last one. The only proof really I've got that I was there was the people that saw me. I don't know, saw me. And they were lovely. I met so many fantastic Spurs fans overseas, whether it be in Perth, in Thailand and Singapore. I had one of those weird moments that I spoke about a year ago in Korea. A very strange moment. I still don't know why it happens to me. It makes all the other journalists chuckle. They don't understand why it happens. But sometimes people like to come over, have a nice chat. We talk about Spurs, and sometimes they'll just want to take a photo. So a couple of people did that in the Singapore National Stadium. And I don't know what happened, but it sparked this weird chain reaction where people started queuing up behind them to do so. I don't know entirely if they realised what they were queuing up for. I wonder whether the people kind of further back were thinking, oh, there's a Spurs player, there's someone really interesting, and they got to the end of the queue or the front of the queue and were like, oh, who's this guy? I don't know if that was the case, and they were just so polite, they were like, oh yeah, let's take a photo with you, but actually they were hoping it was someone actually interesting. But personally, it felt like I'd clambered onto that Z-list celebrity bit at the bottom of the ladder just for a moment, just to wonder what it must be like to be someone of any real importance. Sometimes not important. Sometimes celebrities are really not important. But yeah, to be honest, I just love chatting away with Spurs fans from around the world. It's amazing. I've said this a million times, but they're so passionate, people around the world. We sometimes get this very insular British view of the people that turn up at the game are the most important fans, blah, 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 very English. When actually the fans that are incredibly passionate around the world who will get up at like 2, 3, 4 a.m. to watch the matches, as passionate, if not maybe more so, in terms of having to go through that process of doing it. Yeah, I'd say the same. I'd say it's exactly the same. It's the same as those who traipse around the country going to away games, who traipse around Europe and the world going to watch Spurs. For these people to kind of get up in the middle of their nights, often when they've got work early the next morning, it takes a lot of dedication. And honestly, it was so lovely to speak to so many of them from so many different places. People from obviously Australia, different parts of Australia that come over to Perth. And honestly, to get across Australia itself is no mean feat. I think we kind of don't appreciate distances in the UK because everything is within, 3-4 hours of each other in England. Maybe a bit more. But in Australia, it's thousands upon thousands of miles. So they get across, as I say, spoke to people from Singapore, Thailand, Brunei, so many different countries people have come from. And actually, don't know if you saw on Twitter, after the Leicester game was rained off in Bangkok, I just found it absolutely wonderful. There was this real group of Spurs fans down at the kind of the base behind one of the goals. They just kept singing all the Spurs chants. They were waving their flags. They were just going through every possible fan emotion you can do, despite the fact that 40 minutes ago, the game they were coming to watch was cancelled. They didn't care. They were there. Well, they did care, of course they cared, but they were there to enjoy themselves and kind of just enjoy being Spurs fans together. And it was so brilliant. I put a little video out and it got back to me from quite a few Thai Spurs fans that they really loved that because it just showed everyone else in the world how much they love it. And actually, they were so dedicated to watching Spurs that they actually came over to Singapore and watched the game there. And some of them found me in the mall as I was off to have my very late lunch after writing up loads of Joe Lewis stuff. And they presented me with this, which is so nice of them. It's so nice of them. It's, I think, if I've got it right, I looked it up, Sawadi means hello, I think, in Thai. And that's Sawadi Spurs. I could be completely wrong. Please, any Thai people underneath, tell me that Gold's messed up another pronunciation or messed up the meaning of a foreign word. It would not be the first time. It's not going to be the last. But no, I really appreciate that. It was very kind. Very, very nice of people. That's one of the elements I love of these tours, is that regardless of, yes, the financial stuff, and of course there is, and that's why Spurs do these things on the whole, but there is also this element that can't be overlooked of bringing the football to the fans. And I love that. People that maybe couldn't afford to get across to watch Premier League matches or even be able to just get a ticket to watch a Premier League match. That was very cool. So now I'm back. As I say, crazy tour. We just, because the thing is with the tour, and again, don't cry for me. It was a tour that I didn't pay for. I'm going to these amazing places. I'm not saying that I'm working down a mine or a nurse or doctor on the front line or anything like that. Absolutely not. But what we have to do in terms of our workload is that we will work kind of a normal day in the countries we're at. So Australia and Singapore, 7 hours ahead of the UK. Thailand, 6 hours ahead. So we'll work our normal day over there. But then obviously we get towards the end of our day and the UK is kind of slap bang in the middle of its afternoon. And there can be stuff breaking over there, the things we have to deal with, transfer rumours, whatever. So you end up doing kind of like a day and a half, sometimes 2 days worth of work just to fit it in. So the tours, while amazing to see where you're going, are full-on experience, especially when it's a club like Tottenham Hotspur. They're a complete and utter drama, soap opera, TV show in itself. I don't know what you'd want to call them. Crazy movie. I watched Cocaine Bear on the way back once I'd done all my work on the flight. It's pretty much, it was like watching Spurs in a movie, just utter chaos, crazy chaos. I'm back now. Actually after I did this, I got a week off until the Shakhtar match, just to kind of rest up and kind of get my brain back into some semblance of working. So yes, I'm sure some of you will be thinking, a week off? What incredible things can happen in that time? Quite a lot in the coming week as well, I'd imagine. But a lot, I think most of the people on this tour who are on the tour are going to have some time off as well. It's madness, but what a tour. Where do we start? I guess the main talking point, which could be one of the things that happens in this week off and may well draw me back to work, of course, is Harry Kane. 30 today. Could say happy birthday, Harry Kane, but he will not be watching this video, so it means nothing whatsoever. But happy birthday, Harry Kane, anyway. And the Germans are coming. The meeting that I think was supposed to be scheduled for today to meet with Daniel Levy to discuss Harry Kane, Bayern Munich high-ranking officials. It sounds like it could now be on Monday. Obviously, that set tongues wagging in Germany. Why was it cancelled? Why was the flight postponed? Who knows? It could be many reasons. I saw some people saying because it was Kane's birthday, but I don't think they're negotiating with Kane. They were negotiating with Leave. I'm not entirely sure it matters whether the Harry Kane was around. I think, I could be wrong, I think looking at their Instagrams, it looks like Postecoglou may have given given the players a few days off. Some of them certainly somehow quickly seem to be away with their loved ones, or it may be a coincidence, maybe they're showing old holiday photos, but it looks like they've been given a couple of days off, which would be understandable because they were shattered after that Lion City Sailors game for reasons that we'll chat about a little bit later. Don't worry, I can hear people going already, Spurs were knackered playing Lion City Sailors. It's not that. It was what they did actually in the 3 days beforehand. So I wouldn't be stunned if Postecoglou has given them a few days to recharge. Because pretty much they're coming back from... Because I saw some people saying, there's going to be a friendly this weekend, and there was a rumour going around about them playing Celtic in Dublin, which I don't think was ever true. Apparently it was some glitch on a stadium website, I think it was, that came up with that. They were always going to come back and have to kind of get over the jet lag. So I guess the best way of doing that was maybe just give the players a couple of days off anyway so they can rest and also come back into training with their brains back on UK time, or if they're going away, they're not going to go away. So can you imagine if they went back to Australia? I would imagine there will be nearby holidays. But yeah, so Harry Kane. I just keep imagining this meeting now. It would be quite funny if they're given these coordinates. Turn up at these coordinates. And when they turn up, it's like a warehouse and they go in and it's just full of Harry Kane Spurs shirts with number 10 on the back. It's like, in your face. Because that was one of the weirder moments. Actually, that happened after the last video, didn't it? The German reporter from Bild just randomly rummaging around in his bag and producing this Kane number 9 Bayern shirt and saying, looks good, no? Honestly, it became a little quirky catchphrase. I must admit that as journalists, there were only 4 of us left by that point. There were 6 of us in Australia, and because knocked down to 4 in Singapore and Thailand. And yes, that did become a little catchphrase of our trip away. Looks good, no? Because it was just so weird. It was so weird, and it's such a strange way of reporting. It's what, a stunt, a publicity stunt. It's not something. Well, I guess I've seen some UK organisations, I guess, do that kind of thing to try and attract attention to something. Sometimes it's kind of more like betting company type stuff over here. Whereas, yeah, it was quite surprising to see it from newspaper reporter. But hey, kind of became the story himself more than anything, which is not what we tend to try and do as journalists. We kind of try to report on a story rather than become the story. But yeah, so the whole way that Bayern have gone about this and their media has been fascinating to watch as a journalist. It's so different to the way UK clubs go about things and UK media go about things. It's been, I think, to be fair, it seems like it's a tinge of arrogance in it, perhaps. I don't know, because it's different. Different countries have different cultures, they have different ways of doing things. Like, I'm sure the reporter that did that saw maybe no issue with it. I mean, obviously he had his accreditation revoked for the next 2 games. Obviously one didn't happen anyway. In the press conferences, which it's difficult. You can argue it maybe from a media perspective. You could maybe argue that was harsh. I'm sure fans would say otherwise. But yeah, it's a very different way of doing things. And the whole Bayern approach has been this really kind of aggressive stance of we want him, he wants us, we're going to get him, we're confident it's going to happen. And it's just not a way that Premier League teams deal with it. Not a way I've ever seen. I'm trying to think if there's any English clubs that have done that. Sometimes an English manager will mention the player because they're kind of trapped into doing so in a way by a question asked. But it's almost like there's a big apologetic thing afterwards, whereas this isn't. This is completely unapologetic. chasing after a player. And yeah, I mean, obviously with the stories about potentially, meetings with Kane in a house, it's claims. It's all very much claims in the media, but yeah, it does give this sense of quite an aggressive pursuing of a player, and Daniel Levy's claims of him maybe looking into tapping up aspects of it and all this sort of stuff. And there was the reports of that. I've never seen anything like it. Being on the other side of it as well is so weird. Seeing, let's be honest, most Spurs players in recent years, there haven't been too much demand for them. So to actually see this way of doing it, look, my view on it all with Harry Kane's decision on it all. I don't get it. I'm not going to go into it in great detail because I've said it in previous videos, but I understand Bayern are a massive club. Great history, great success, big Champions League contender, terrific fans, great fan base. I get all of that. I absolutely get all of that. However, I just think for brand Kane, I don't get moving to the Bundesliga. I don't get it. I get it's a great league. I don't get it from a global appeal for a player moving into that league. It's a well-watched league. It's a good league. Is it a globally watched league where everyone around the world watches that? No. Is it anywhere near the Premier League in terms of exposure? No. I can understand it from the Bundesliga's point of view. I think one of the comments from one of the people higher up at Bayern was, it would be great for the Bundesliga, and I think it would. Would it be so for Kane? I don't think so. It's of all the clubs you could have kind of put to me that, Harry Kane might go there, I would not have expected in the past that to be somewhere that Harry Kane were to end up. Just purely because of that. He's trying to really kind of create this massive global brand for himself. And I don't think moving to the Bundesliga does that for you. Again, I hope that doesn't offend any Bayern fans. If not, the Bayern fans will probably ever be watching this because they are a massive club. They are. There's no getting away from that. And he could win the Champions League with them, and maybe that could be the motivation. But I don't get it as a whole product for him. And the other reason I really don't get moving there now is because of the absolute freedom that he has to pick anything he wants. He can go anywhere in January. He can talk to any foreign club in January. Next summer, he can pick any club in the world he wants to go to and probably earn far, far more than he can get by moving now. I just wonder whether I don't know. And also, if he were to stay until next summer, that also gives him the idea just that if there's any curiosity inside him of whether Postecoglou's football could actually bring him what has always been his real priority, was to win stuff and have success with Spurs. Maybe just that gives him a chance to at least have a look to see, maybe that is going to work. We've said it before that he's open to all eventualities. He's open to, if a bid is accepted by a club, he will talk to that club and he may go if he agrees with it. He is open to staying for another season and then going. And he is also believed to be open to seeing how things go at Spurs and then maybe considering signing a new deal later this year if things are going well. But yeah, I just feel like if he ends up at Bayern this summer, then obviously there'll be an aspect of Spurs felt that they had to accept a bid, which is so un-Daniel Levy-like. It's weird. And there's the other aspect is if there's something else to do with it. If there's, I don't know whether there's like a financial aspect to it. Is there like a sponsorship side to it? Is there something that we're not aware of at this point? Is there some kind of, I don't know, some lucrative financial bonus of going there? And look, I'm not saying that, I guess I kind of am there, but I don't mean to really saying that Harry Kane's about the money because I have never got that sense about him whatsoever. But I'm just trying to find some idea of why moving right now would be the right time to do it. I don't know. We'll see. But for me, from the Tottenham point of view, I wouldn't sell. We've seen how Spurs have taken big money for their top players and gone, yay, woo, and just thrown it in the air and gone, oh no, we've lost it all. And they have just wasted it. I have very little faith that Spurs would be able to adequately replace Harry Kane. I don't think you can. I think you would have to have the most incredible recruitment system to unearth maybe a couple of talents, an attacking midfielder and a striker that could combine to reproduce what he does. And I just don't think Spurs have proved to have that recruitment system over recent years. I still think, and I'll bang this drum until my hands fall off, that I think financially it also doesn't actually make sense, because I think you've got more of a chance of getting in the Champions League and making back the same kind of money anyway, and thus in the process convincing Kane to stay because you've done well and you've kind of improved and you've gone in the right direction, than you do just selling him. I don't get it. Yeah, and if it happens, I will be very confused. I will have a very confused face on. I genuinely, honestly, at this point, I don't know which way this is going to go. The kind of feeling within, or just around Spurs throughout the whole tour was a similar idea. It was like, just no one seemed to know, and Postecoglou didn't seem to know, and just that it was a really kind of delicate situation that could end up turning in any way. He was, as you could probably understand, kept away from us, mostly in the media, in terms of, wasn't offered up for interview, which is understandable. He probably would not have wanted to do that interview anyway. And I think it's because of that delicate situation. Strangely enough, I was at an event in Singapore Tuesday that he was at. It was a lovely little thing at the Children's Wishing Well charity in Singapore, where they worked with underprivileged kids and they give them this lovely kind of setting. It's like a bit of a school slash, it's not quite a preschool, but it kind of had the vibe of like a primary school setting kind of idea, but also just giving them little things that maybe they wouldn't be able to get in their life. And Harry Kane came along to it. It was Harry Kane, Eric Dyer, Alfie Whiteman, Alfie Devine, and Josh Keeley as well, the young goalkeeper. And it was like a really lovely kind of event. They were just doing this style of painting with the children, and Harry was there, and he was polite to us. There was a couple of us in the media, myself and Tom Barkley from The Sun. And he was very polite, said hello when he came in and goodbye when he went and everything. But there were a few moments where he was kind of, I don't know, within about 6 foot of us and kind of looking for stuff to do with the kids. And maybe in the past, Harry would have turned around and had a little chat with us, said hello and a little bit of small talk. But it was just awkward. And I think he knew that he couldn't really do that. But to be honest, both Tom and I, we're not those kind of journalists. We wouldn't have tried to trip him up or do anything awkward. But I can understand it from his point of view. It probably would have felt like it just leads down a rabbit hole it's not worth going down. So yeah, it was a very, very strange kind of atmosphere. Anything to do with Harry. And yeah, I saw today actually after I landed that there's now been links with Spurs and Matthias Tell, the very young, was he 18-year-old French Bayern forward, kind of a real talent. I think some people have kind of claimed the next Mbappe. Everyone's the next something, aren't they? They're never just them. I must admit, when I saw it and I was kind of reading some of the stuff, I did suddenly have visions of, what if they loan him back right at the last minute when they get him like at the end of the window and it's like Fraser Campbell and Berbatov. Here you go. Here, have this young person that's going to be very good, we think, but will not replace what you actually want him to do right now. That's not me dismissing how good Matthias Tell is. I keep hearing very good things about him, but is he going to be ready to replace Harry Kane right now? No. But then few ready-made players are able to do that. I guess ultimately the fact that talks are being held, what does that suggest? I guess it suggests that Levy will listen to what they have to say. You could maybe say it's just being polite and keeping things cordial. It may be that they turn up and he goes la 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 and puts his fingers in his ears and they don't actually get anywhere. I saw the German media are pushing out that they're not going above Bayern will not go above, I think it was 100 million euros, which is in the 80s, isn't it? Is it maybe 83? I can't remember how much it is, pounds, 83 million pounds. Which, all the talk about Spurs was 100 million, wasn't it, to begin with, pounds. But if that would include add-ons, I don't know. Because this is the weird thing about the way, I think it was Uli Hoeneß said in his comments about Daniel Levy needs to name a fee. And it's a bit like, well, if he hasn't named a fee, kind of what does that say? A price tag? I genuinely don't know which way this is going to go. I've had far more confidence that he would be at Spurs next season than I probably have in the last couple of weeks, only because of the awkwardness around the camp, around Spurs. This is the thing, it was a really good, positive, actually, the camp itself, the squad are really close, and Postecoglou's done terrific work with them. But the Kane situation, it was so awkward, and the way the players kind of didn't really know how to deal with it. Sonny said that, he doesn't even think Harry knows what's going to happen next, and I think that's the overriding thing, because ultimately it all comes down to, I guess, what happens in that room on Monday. It comes down to whether Bayern are prepared to, in the words of the Godfather, make him an offer he can't refuse, Daniel Levy. And also it's down to whether Daniel Levy really thinks, is it better to take the money now? Lose one of the best players in the world, one of the best strikers in the world, for a sum of money that, you may sign a centre-forward and a centre-back that everyone's craving. Does it make Spurs a better team because of it? I think Harry Kane is so good. I think you struggle to actually make your team better. Personally, I don't understand why Spurs can't keep Harry Kane, at least for another season, and buy, the centre-backs that make it better. Because, look, I know Postecoglou's a man for a rebuild, and I've seen some people saying if Kane goes, like, the season's over, it's all written off. I don't agree to that. I don't think Spurs are going to be a better team with Harry Kane out of it. I don't. I think it's one of those where you could maybe argue they could build over time to become that. I don't think this season that would be the case. I just think Harry's that good. I just rate him so highly. So, yeah, we'll see. I wouldn't sell him for anything. But it's not my money. If it was, I probably wouldn't run a football club, quite frankly, because it's just it's a crazy thing to get into. It's a bit like being a referee. I don't think you can really... you're never going to probably make money out of it. Well, maybe unless you're Tottenham's hierarchy, and some other clubs. But they often say that it's kind of almost got to be more of a hobby nowadays, hasn't it, than an occupation. But so let's see what happens with Harry Kane. I'm very aware that it's kind of gone on for a while about it, but it dominated the tour until those final days when Mr. Joe Lewis popped up outside a New York court. It very much dominated the tour, and I think I said in the last video, had it not been in Australia to start the tour, it would have, I really feel, overshadowed what Postecoglou was doing. But thankfully, because it was Australia and Postecoglou was such a kind of a big presence there, it still very much became the Postecoglou train, Postecoglou show, whatever you want to call it. And I do generally think he's done really good stuff behind the scenes. I just would love Harry Kane to be a part of it. And we'll probably know maybe by the next video which way we're going with it all. Oh my goodness. I can't even get my head around it if it was to go. I just can't get my head around it. I don't think I've prepared myself the required amount. I know there's some people that are just saying, "I'll take the money." I see some people just let him go now. I would still take Harry Kane in an uncommitted state, I think, over any other player kind of almost coming in the world. Well, you know what I mean? It's not like an Mbappe or someone like that. Yeah, I saw those stories too. That made me chuckle. Wasn't it a Saudi club came with a £300 million bid? It's like, oh yeah, I suppose we can offer you Davinson Sanchez. We've got some brilliant chirpy key rings that have just come into the club shop, and we can offer you some seats to NFL games and some Beyonce concerts. I just thought that was the weirdest rumour ever. I get it because of the close links between the PSG owner and Daniel Levy, but yeah, come on. That would be the most amazing story ever. That would trump everything that happened on the tour. So yeah, back to the tour. Lots of really good interviews. If you haven't seen them already, keep an eye out. Look at my Twitter feed. Look at the work website, Football.London, that I work for. Because yeah, we swept up. Other than Harry, we've got terrific access on this tour. Trying to think of some of the really good ones. So, like I said earlier, the way it worked was there were 6 journalists in Australia. 2 of them went off to do other bits and pieces they had to do work-wise, and the 4 of us moved on to Thailand and then Singapore. And the best thing probably for me of it all was the sit down with Ange. That kind of makes a tour when you get a sit down with the manager. And we've kind of had slightly compromised ones in the last couple of years. Obviously there was COVID in the middle as well, but like last year in Korea we only got Antonio Conte kind of for about 10-15 minutes in a corridor ahead of his press conference, which was when ironically he actually came out with the I asked him a question about something and he came out with the Jed Spence being a club signing line. We had one with Poch in that 2019 year, which was very much a kind of a rushed effort in a corridor. But the year before that, I think it was, had a brilliant one with Poch, a really good hour-long sit-down. And this with Ange was almost an hour as well. Ange, like he's my mate. Although we've been having a bit of, well, I don't say we've had banter. I think I get the idea that he's decided, I can have a bit of a laugh with this guy, as in I can use my little wisecracks on things he says. So I've been getting a few of those, which we've got a few of those coming up. You might have heard some funny little lines from him. Seems to be for some reason to my questions. It could be that he just wants to take the mickey out of me. It could be. But yeah, the sit down was great. If you haven't read it, I did a big long read on the sit down. It was about 4,500 words because, almost an hour's worth of stuff. It was just brilliant. There was 2 pieces because I asked him about the centre backs and wanting them as well. So that was fantastic. Then what also happens on these tours is sometimes the media events, they're like community events where the players are like that painting thing with the school kids that I spoke about earlier. What will sometimes happen is that events will be scheduled at the same time. So we have to kind of split up as a little group of journalists, and you'll have some of us interviewing some players, the others interviewing others at exactly the same time simultaneously, and then we'll pool our interviews and we'll all put them out. So sometimes we do work together though. Vicario and Udogi, we did those together at an event with children. That was both really fascinating guys, terrific English, really good interviews. I'd look at those. Basuma was got in the mix zone. That was an excellent interview, really good, kind of showed his confidence. Manor Solomon's a very good talker as well. Sonny, we had a press conference, and then Matt Barlow from the Daily Mail also got him as an individual one, which we put out there as well. He was really good on Kane. He was really good on his whole injury issues last season. The pain he was going through, I don't think we realised quite how bad it was. Honestly, have a look at that. I've put that one out. What else have we had? Maddison and Skip impressors are very good. Skippy obviously becoming more and more kind of confident with the way he talks. Maddison's a very good talker. Really, really like the way Maddison talks. Asked him, I kind of tried, this tour is quite good. We were able to pretty much get 3 questions in each time, whether it be to the player or the manager. So you kind of, 3 questions is enough to get a little bit of a back and forth going. Maddison was really good. Told me my question was good. Absolutely stroked the ego of a journalist. Absolutely works. I think the question was, that was it. Loads of the players at Spurs already. Was there anyone in the training sessions that actually surprised you? You weren't aware of them. And he couldn't really think of an answer. And then I asked him about Basuma, and he was like, yeah, him, Basuma. I should have answered that in the second question. It was quite nice. Skippy was good. I think we've got Kulusevski that's still to come, as interview with him. Like I say, we'd split up sometimes. So some of us interviewed Pedro Porro at Perth Zoo, that'll be coming out soon, that interview. And then some of the other journalists went into Christian Romero. That's a fantastic interview. If you've seen that, I've put that one out as well. Talking about, he came back from the World Cup and there was a split between the players and Conte, he felt. Spoke about his own future, how he's turned down offers to leave this summer, really wants to play his best years at Spurs. Also spoke about, he slammed the claims that he's more motivated to play for Argentina than he is Spurs. Fascinating interviews, really, really good, really honest interview, kind of almost like a no holds barred interview. It was very good. He did it through a translator, but it was all translated really well and perfectly. So there was no kind of summation or guessing of what he said, kind of thing. It was the proper translation. So that was really good. Who else did we have? Ledley King. There's a Ledley King one to come. Oh, of course. So at that event that I was saying about Harry Kane was at, I mentioned the other players. Tom Barkley from The Sun and I both interviewed. They had to happen at the same time in different rooms because of the time pressures. So with my kind of academy knowledge and watching all the under-21s loads, I went in and spoke to Alfie Devine, which went out today. It's a really nice little interview. He's a very good talker. For an 18-year-old, really spoke well, really interesting. Spoke about the way Postecoglou's dealt with him, the things he's asked him to do. Talked about working with Maddison and Basuma and kind of learning from them. Mason and Jedinak as midfield coaches for him, bring him along. And whether he had to do an initiation song, he didn't this time. He previously had to sing "Take That," and they booed him. They booed a kid singing West Ham, singing a. He was very good at against West Ham. That's where I got that from. Singing a "Take That" song, and while I was doing that, Tom went into the other room and got an amazing interview with Eric Dyer, which we put out. Honestly, have a read. I think Tom would tell you it's probably one of the most emotional interviews he's ever done. I think he maybe even tweeted something out like that. Eric Dyer I think the whole weight of the Dele Alli interview just hit him, and he did this such an emotional, heartfelt, tearful interview. He just kept having to stop. Tom played me back the audio from it so that we could both write our stories and really understand exactly kind of how it played out in the room. And you just see what a good friend he is to Dele, and how Dele, they just love each other so much. But obviously with the stuff and the way it was with Dele didn't feel he was able to tell anyone some of these things that happened to him in his past. And yeah, Eric just crushed him that he wasn't able to do more because he didn't know about these things. It's a lovely interview, honestly. All credit to Tom, because he obviously put Eric in the comfortable situation where he was able to talk like this, rather than it being a prying conversation. It was allowing him to go at his own pace. It's lovely. I put that out yesterday, and Tom's obviously put it out as well. But what I really thought was interesting, that Romero and Dyer were the most honest, probably, interviews of the bunch, the really raw ones. And I actually felt for both players it did them the world of good. And we've kind of said this to Spurs as well, a few of us, that it actually shows you that if you don't maybe try to, and this goes for any club, if you don't maybe try to clamp down on questions that you're worried about, the players will often be able to talk about stuff. They'll have a sense of responsibility, and they'll talk about stuff in a very open way. And as it was, I feel like Romero's come out of that interview in a much better place with the fan base. I think telling the fan base, I want to be here for my best years, was a great line. And I think slamming the whole idea that he'd rather play for Argentina, he just pretty much said, I would have left if that was the case. I wouldn't be happy, I wouldn't be here. And he just spoke so well. And I think a lot of people's estimation of him. And Eric Dyer, we know the flack he got. And there was still some terrible replies under it. It's such a heart kind of breaking story, and the way he's talking about it. And you've still got people kind of slating him as a defender. I'm sorry, but if you can't extrapolate your opinion of someone as a player from something that you're reading about them as a person, that's the side of social media I just don't like at all. I've got to be honest. But I do feel that actually with a lot of people respected Eric Dyer for the love he's got for Dele and the way he kind of spoke about him. And we've all been there. We've had people that have been suffering in different ways, whether it's with mental health, whatever. And, you know, that feeling of kind of helplessness sometimes. And I think he kind of put that into words so well with a lot of what he said. And I think it did a lot of people, he got a lot of respect for it as well. Sorry, my main point going back to it is that I think if you let these players talk sometimes, they're clever lads. You know, a lot of these players, Christian, Eric, Eric's just, whatever you want to think about his defending or anything, he's a very intelligent, articulate guy who is very thoughtful. And look, if he's to stick around this season, I really hope that he flourishes under Postecoglou. I still, like I've said before, I don't know whether he's going to be a regular starter, but a fully fit Eric Dyer, maybe we see the form that he had at the start of last season, maybe previous ones, but we'll see. That's a whole other thing compared to what the interview was about. Oh my goodness, it was 40 minutes into this and we've just kind of spoken about a few topics, but it was that kind of tour. Honestly, it was just madness. I do apologise, it's going to be a biggie. Please, actually, you don't have to stick with it. Watch it in different sittings if you need to, or don't watch it at all. You know what I'm like. I'm not going to one that tells you to like this, do this, whatever. Just if you want to watch it, great. If you don't worry about it. I won't hold it against you. So yeah, the tour was really good. I loved the interviews. I loved the access. I love getting to know Ange. That was a big thing. I'm going to keep calling him Ange now, aren't I, rather than Postecoglou, clearly. I loved watching training in full, the open sessions before matches. I loved the fact that Postecoglou would play the team he was going to play the next day as well in the training match, and he would play the subs he was going to bring on as the other 11. And you could see which players are clearly out of favour or coming back from injuries. It gave you a really good indicator. And I loved watching the Postecoglou style of football being shaped in front of your eyes. It was fascinating. That's not even going into the crazy different climates that we were going from. The very mild Perth and having their winter to the mad Bangkok, which is such a crazy cool town, but muggy hot temperatures with sudden monsoon weather. Who would have thought monsoon weather might not be great for playing matches in? I know. And on to Singapore, which I had some Singapore kind of people that live there, expats and actual Singaporeans, that were like, you always say it's a dry heat. It's not a dry heat, but it kind of is for me. I think it's because in relation to the other places, so in Bangkok, I felt Bangkok was muggier and this close kind of humid, I hate to use the word moistness, but it's kind of like a wet feeling in the air around you, the humidity. Whereas I feel that it is a bit drier in Singapore. And the last time I went to Singapore 4 years ago, we went to Shanghai. Shanghai, I would walk out the door of the hotel from the aircon and suddenly like everything about you was soaked just because the humidity is just... And I don't feel that in Singapore, but they know it better than me. They live there. So yeah, let's talk about the final game of the season, and that was the other thing about training is we got to see some kind of quite crucial injuries as well. Tongi Ondembele getting injured the night before the first game, that ended up being so pivotal to his tour. Our poor Alfie Whiteman in the training session that was before the Singapore game. Taken off on a stretcher, ankle. We don't actually know the extent of that. It's one I've got to chase up really. But yeah, that didn't look good for him either. So yeah, for that final game, it was against the marvellously named Lion City Sailors. Of course, it was a lesser opposition. It was meant to be. It was meant to be Roma, Jose's Roma. Didn't happen because of issues with their tour earlier in the stage. I think it was in maybe Korea. They were having some promoter issues, and it ended up they just kind of sacked off the whole tour in the end. But what I found really interesting about this game was that if you think back, a year ago we were watching the Conte training sessions with the late great Gianpiero Ventroni, the players getting absolutely doing these ridiculous pitch-long runs after about an hour and a half of training, Harry Kane being sick at the side of the pitch, Sonny collapsing and the whole crowd going, oh! All the Koreans, it's like South Park, they killed Kenny, it's like, they killed Sonny. It was genuinely, everyone was like, no! And other players dropping like flies. From what we kind of always understood about that session, that was while normal sessions were pretty bad, there was always this feeling kind of around the club that one was particularly like, whoa, that was awful. It was like maybe one for showing the world, yeah, this is what we do with our players. We make them into like soldiers or something. And I'm sure when the Korean fans went, when Sonny dropped, was probably Conte was like, yes. This is it. This is why I want them to know how tough I am, kind of thing. And it was just quite interesting that fast forward 12 months, and after the first 45 minutes, the players were made to do pitch-long runs. And it was like, ooh, so stepping back in time here. It wasn't as brutal as Korea. It wasn't as many. And I guess you're playing 45 minutes of football and the more competitive nature. Because the thing about Lion City Sailors, yes, they're a Singapore Premier League side. They're third in their league. They're not of the level, of course, anywhere near what Spurs would be expecting to play in these things. They were drafted in at late notice because everyone else had their schedule set. But one positive of them was that they're mid-season right now. So they're sharp and they're kind of fit to play games. So at least it pushed Spurs in that sense. As you saw, there were a couple of times they caught Spurs on the counter and they were having a race back. So yeah, it is probably that little bit more. But it was quite interesting to see running this kind of length of the pitch and what he'd done, Postecoglou, to make up for the lack of the Leicester game in Thailand. He absolutely just tore them to pieces for the next 3 days in terms of they had double sessions every day and tough double sessions. He really put them through it and it really reflected in the game. Spurs were leggy, especially the first half, and that was the knock-on effect really of what he'd been putting them through. He was trying to get as much into their legs as he wanted from that match because he'd spoken about before, he was going to play a lot of them for an hour. So he had to kind of then try to replicate that in some kind of training fashion and they were knackered. And it was interesting as well, Kane didn't do the pitch-long runs. I don't know why. It may be the fact that, he's just managing his body carefully after the last couple of days. Other people may read more into that. And I can't remember. At the time, I couldn't work out who it was, but there was another player that didn't do it. Sonny was involved. It wasn't him. I'll have to look back at the photos, but someone else didn't end up doing it of the first half team because there were only 8 outfield players out there. I cannot for the life of me. We were trying to work out who it was, but we were a fair way back. And by the time we kind of had started to really look close and try and work it out, poor old Yves Bissouma dropped down and had some kind of issue with his foot that he was holding. We were like, oh no, not the ankle again. But Postecoglou spoke about that afterwards. But yeah, so as I was saying, it was a bit slower because of those sessions. But still, Spurs had 24 shots in the first half alone, 37 in all, with 11 on target. Yes, the massive caveat that this was against, Lion City Sailors, but a lesser opposition. Although they did play well in the first half. Honestly, it felt a little bit almost like an FA Cup tie in the first half, and they went ahead, of course, as well. There was a very real possibility Spurs were going in 1-0 at the break, 1-0 down. But they didn't. It was another 600-plus passing game, same as the West Ham game. They had 634 in this one, Spurs, with an 89% pass success rate and 79% possession. Again, absolutely expected against an opposition like that. And it was only because really Lion City began to really kind of tire in the second half. They tried to make some subs, but not as wholesale. Spurs changed the whole team for the second half. And yeah, it was because they'd worked them so hard. But to be fair, I know, I say about, we know that going to a country in a monsoon season is not the greatest time to ever go for a match. But I would say, if I'm going to offer any kind of defence for it, Man U and Liverpool played there a year ago against each other. Other clubs have played there many times. And Spurs have never had a game cancelled like that because of like the conditions or anything like that. They've never had a pre-season match called off. Obviously, they've lost opponents like they did with Roma, but a game's never been called off like that. It just came down so hard. It was mad. We were there, and we had some kind of Singapore journalists were coming up and saying, no, that'll be on, it'll be fine. And to be fair, a lot of the water went, but just not enough. Absolutely not enough. Spurs brought their own groundsman, and he was going around like dropping the ball. I think there was a video clip went around of him dropping the ball. There was this patch on the edge of the area, and he just dropped it and it just stopped. It did nothing. And watching the keepers going out there, they went out there first when it was really coming down, and it was just like swimming lessons. It was mad. But back to Singapore. Lion City, their fitness helped. That was probably the only thing you could really take away from it, was that it helped Spurs push on that little bit more. Go in for 50-50s with a little bit more effort and try and chase back with that little bit more effort as well. And what I thought was quite interesting, that was... actually, I'll give you the Postecoglou quote afterwards. He said, the performance was okay. We knew that we'd have a few punishing days for the boys, and he kind of laughed when he said that. We purposely made them work hard in training because we missed the last game. So I knew we wouldn't be super sharp today, and it looked that way, particularly in front of goal. In general, I thought we played some decent football, and our attitude was great until the end. But because we worked so hard before, we just didn't have the legs we needed to get into the right areas. And actually, it was quite interesting. Postecoglou kept making a real point about how much he was pushing and working the team hard, fitness-wise. It was almost like he was trying to say, it's just not that. It's not only that Italian bloke. Yeah, I do that too. I do push them but in just different ways. And he was saying it sometimes when we weren't even asking questions about that. He said, we use this final leg just to catch up on what we missed in Thailand by not playing the game. Training sessions have been solid to say the least. That was in his answer to one of my questions. The boys have worked really hard and the conditions here make that difficult, so I knew we weren't going to be that sharp, but attitude endeavour was there. We're trying to implement the stuff we've been working on, and that's the main thing. Maybe we didn't have the legs, but the effort and desire to put in place what we've been working on was there. And I asked him about Basuma and going down and not looking too great out there, holding his ankle. He said, I think he's okay. He did all the runs at the end. I think he was exhausted, mate. I haven't picked up anything from the medics. It's fair to say they'll be exhausted after what we've done in the last 3 days, but I don't think there's any issues. And yes, you'll notice he has started to use mate, and not in a bad way, I don't think. He's actually using it okay. So praise the Lord. I've not got a bad mate yet. And yeah, I think the thing with Postecoglou football is the natural relentlessness of it is going to push you. It's going to push you in your fitness naturally. How many times can I say naturally in a sentence? It is, though, isn't it? It's constant pressing, it's constant movement, it's constantly being an option for pass and outlet, and a desire to also prevent the ball from being out of play much. That's part of it as well. The kind of Postecoglou football, it's the idea is to overwhelm the opposition with waves of attacks, just leaving them exhausted, really, is the way it kind of is used. He uses the substitutions quite methodically when it comes to the league season and will refresh players in key areas to make sure that pace is not kind of ever going to dip. But yeah, they did look a bit leggy. I actually felt the second half team looked fresher than the first half team. But then that may have just been because it naturally related to the Sailors players, which I love saying the Sailors players, dipping in terms of their tiredness as well. Other thing I've noticed, and I noticed this in a lot of the training sessions as well, is that there was a real focus, and I saw this carry into the games, of low crosses. It's quite ironic that Harry Kane, I think, scored the most headed goals in the season last season, because in training sessions, they do these bits where the attack, and then when they get to a certain point, the defence stops that they're playing against. It's like an 11v11 walkthrough almost, but then the defence stops, and the winger or fullback has to then get to the byline, cut the ball back, and someone in the middle, the centre forward, whoever, has to then smash the ball into the net. But it's not curled into the box high. It's not any kind of high crosses. There's the occasional high cross in a match, and of course set pieces are going to be a different thing. Still waiting to find out whether Gianni Vio is part of the coaching staff. He wasn't out there on tour, but yeah, I don't know if we've had a full and final update on whether he will be, but because he's a freelance coach, it may end up that Postecoglou tries to kind of get him in when they return, but certainly I don't think I saw him at any point out on the tour. There are a few people, unexpected people. Well, depends how unexpected you want to be. Scott Munn was definitely out there. He went all 3 countries. I'm pretty sure he was spotted in. I certainly spotted him in Perth. Others spotted him in Thailand and Singapore, I think. Still not officially working for the club. Still no start date yet because of the issues from the Citigroup end and letting him go. But yeah, there is a guest. I think he's got family in, is it maybe Melbourne still? And I think he's also got family still in China. So presumably you could argue that he was moving around between both. I'm sure he's not doing any unofficial work behind the scenes at all. But yeah, so keep an eye out for that in the actual matches. This real emphasis on low crossing. There was a really good one early in the game when Destiny Udogie got to the touchline, pulled it back, and Kane screwed his shot wide. But yeah, that's kind of how it's mostly going to be, I think, this season. Lots of people rushing into the box and the wingers trying to play hard, low balls into the box that either the defender's going to knock into his own goal or the striker's going to get to. They'll be disappointed about the defending. Shock horror when you've got no new centre-backs. The goal they conceded was pants. Ball over the top. Pedro Porro, again. Actually, no, you've got to go back. Ben Davies made a complete mess of it. Lost the ball, then was caught out of position because he lost the ball. The ball was played over the top. Pedro Porro, a bit of an issue in losing people behind him. He's got to really work on his defending. That's one aspect of it. And it was kind of it was a funny finish. It was almost like it was touched onto the player and then went in, kind of got a foot to it. But hey, it's a goal, nevertheless. Doesn't matter how it goes in. Didn't really give Vicario much of a chance, to be honest. But yeah, Postecoglou said on one of the days, I can't remember, maybe it was the pre-Singapore one, that he was asked, "Can you play Udogie and Porro together?" He was like, "I certainly hope so." Sounded like that's the plan at some point. He said they're the kind of type of profile that we're looking for. So yeah, of course we want to do that, but he's going to have to improve especially Porro's defending. I think at least Udogie plays for Italy under-21s as a full-back rather than a wing-back, and I don't think it's as alien to him as it kind of looks for Porro at times. I still think that it would be more likely to be one of those two and one of the other slightly more defensive ones. It could be Emerson Royale, who they're calling Emmy now. I noticed that around the camp, he's called Emmy. A bit of useless trivia for you, but that was something, one of those little weird things you hear. And Davies, I asked him about Davies, whether he was thinking of him more as a centre-back. And he said, no, he's been playing there to kind of help us out. He does a very good job as a centre-back, but my inclination is that he will be a very, very good left-back for us. So that kind of, and also don't forget, he was playing there instead of Sanchez, Rodon, Dyer. So it was more a sense of the pecking order, if anything. But I get the impression, I think, that certainly to begin with, you'll see one of Porro or Udogie maybe, and then Emerson or Davies. Or maybe if he wants to play it safe right at the start, especially against someone like Brentford, maybe he goes for both Davies and Emerson with the experience there and slowly brings in the other two. But Spurs got a trophy. It's a trophy. It's silverware. Wore a trophy. That was another little funny thing. Private joke. It's not really a private joke, but one of those little silly things that we kind of kept saying to each other, because we don't, contrary to maybe belief, is because of the massive replies we get under stuff when we're doing things about Spurs. It's not saying, oh, we're so popular. It's because of the topics, and they'll obviously circulate. And we don't really look at most of the replies, but there is one that turns up, and although mainly it's on like the club account, is "wore a trophy." It's just such a silly comment, and it became again another one of our little slogans of the tour. I think even Charlie Eccleshare ended up using it under one of my tweets. Or someone in Germany saying, Tell wants to stay at Bayern regardless of what happens with Harry Kane. He's a young player. Why would he want to kind of leave Bayern now anyway? But we'll see on that one. But because I wouldn't imagine he'd come in as a immediate starter at Spurs either. So why would you leave the club you're kind of developing at, playing in the Champions League to do that? But hey, we're not going back to all of that just yet. They lifted the Tiger Cup, Spurs. Wore a trophy. You'll never sing that, all of those. It's not a major trophy. It's more of a souvenir, isn't it, of a tour. And it was quite funny watching the ceremony at the end because Harry Kane obviously was captain first half, but he wasn't actually captain in the second half. I can't remember who was. Presumably it would have been someone like Højbjerg, maybe, because Davies had it the other day and he was in the same lineup as Kane. But either way, I don't think it was Basuma. I think it must have been Højbjerg. But the Richarlison got man of the match because of his hat-trick, and he walked out and was the one that lifted the cup. And I think the others were kind of going to be like, playing it cool. And just Richarlison did it with such enthusiasm. You can kind of see everyone behind him actually start to enjoy it as well. And you've got Harry Kane laughing and clapping behind him. And Richarlison just lifted it like he'd won the World Cup. It was very funny. He's a funny character. This is what I mean about this tour. It's actually been a really nice vibe among the players. They've been really happy and really good spirits. They really like Postecoglou's football. it's, I think he said this before, and the players, some of them have said it, it's getting them to play the football that they really wanted to get into the game to play as kids. So it's the kind of football they love to play, and they just seem so happy. And some of the players that maybe we thought were more sullen type figures behind the scenes have all come out really kind of being quite happy, and lots of laughs whenever we saw them, and even in kind of what maybe they thought were private moments or little moments that were aside from the main things that were going on, and maybe they thought they were being watched. They were just enjoying themselves. And yeah, that trophy presentation was a little bit like that. It did make me chuckle. So talking of some of those players, Lo Celso and the returning gang, and maybe some of the players that we thought were not going to make it. It's been really fascinating to see Postecoglou essentially going through the squad and deciding who he does and doesn't want. And I think we can kind of get a rough idea now with a lot of those players, because it's a cliche, but if he could get any of them working again, it is like a new signing. It is as simple as that, because some of those players have been away from the club for a year and a half. Lo Celso's been at Villarreal for 18 months pretty much, barring a very small break in the middle. So yeah, he could kind of repurpose some of these players and can kind of help. And because also don't forget, it's very different to the last two managers. So some of them may not have worked for a Conte and Mourinho, but would for a Postecoglou, as they would have maybe for a Pochettino. And certainly with Lo Celso, I think it's a great example. We thought Tanguy was going to be the man to kind of benefit the most, but obviously that ankle injury was just rubbish timing. And then after that, even when he seemed to be fit, although I did have one fan tell me who was at the Singapore game that he thought he saw Tanguy limping after the match. I didn't see that, so I don't know whether that's definitely the case, but certainly they were quite clear that they'd seen that. So it may be that he's still struggling a bit with it, and that might be why he hasn't got a chance. But certainly Giovanni Lo Celso came in there and went, "Thank you very much," and almost thank you very much, and took the opportunity. I thought he was excellent in both games. Yes, I know second opposition, of course, with the Sailors is not going to be great, but it was more about his attitude, the way he played, and the fact that, you know, he really just took everything that was coming from, took everything that was given to him. Whereas I feel like other players just didn't really seem to get an opportunity. Davinson Sanchez played second half, wasn't particularly great. Isn't seen again. He's playing with the we called them the bomb squad, which was harsh, but it kind of became our nickname for them because they were the players in open training we knew we weren't going to see in the match the next day. And some of them would come back from injury, some of them were young players. So yeah, technically it weren't the bomb squad, it was just an easy tag for them. But certainly some of them, like Jed Spence and Joe Rodon, I don't think they're getting in the Spurs team next season. It doesn't look like there's a space for them. You know, Jed Spence has got Porro and Emerson ahead of him. Rodon, I don't think, from my understanding, he was unfit or had any kind of injury. I think Postecoglou's just decided not for me, which is a shame because I think he's going to be a good Premier League defender for someone. I think there'll be a fair few clubs interested in him as well, and I'd be intrigued to see what happens with Jed in terms of whether Spurs were to even try and cut their losses and take a permanent move for him. I think personally, you probably try and loan him out. You could do with, I think I said it before, like a Hoffenheim type loan that Cess had. Get him out maybe in a different league, and I suppose he went to Rennes. It was a funny loan, that one. It was kind of just a stopgap loan for Rennes rather than a full half a season loan. But get him out maybe to the Bundesliga. After me saying about the Bundesliga already, but get him out there and get him some game time, and see where he stands in 12 months' time. But yeah, kind of the way I saw them, they were like, do you remember in Toy Story, the toys that were left under Sid the bully's kid's bed? They kind of emerged from the shadows. Oh, they've forgotten how that was. That was kind of like what the players in that little group were. You didn't really see them on match days. They weren't on the subs bench because they were only allowed, I think it was between 11 and 14 subs. And so these other players were just kind of just lurking in the background going, oh, this is a nice trip we've had, kind of thing. It must be very frustrating when you're not even getting there to play football. I suppose in Jed Spence's defence, he was coming back from a knee injury. It was a bit touch and go whether he was going to end up going on the tour anyway. So maybe it was just felt that he was never going to be in a state to possibly play a match. But hey, get out there, bond with the squad, see what he was like in training for Postecoglou. But yeah, I'd be stunned if we see he's sticking around come the end of the summer. I think a loan move's what he needs, really. But back to Lo Celso. Lo Celso, I've probably said it in videos before, I felt like with Conte's system, it would work quite well. It just never really clicked with Conte, though. We had that awkward one, didn't it, where he was left out. And I think Conte said he was unavailable, and Lo Celso put like an Instagram post saying he was fit and available. It was all very awkward. But then we also felt there was this strange thing of, on one side, he was a player of interest to clubs, so there was money there, and money that potentially could be brought into Spurs and put towards other players or in other areas. But then also there was the aspect of, yeah, but he actually fits the midfield three really well. We see him do that for Argentina. A good player. Probably would have gone with, well, he was going to go with them to the World Cup. Obviously picked up that serious, was it a hamstring injury and he missed out? Obviously it's difficult. Some people said, he would have won the World Cup with Argentina. You don't know whether a little variables and changing one player, how the butterfly effect and how it changes everything. But certainly a guy that knows how to play in midfield three. And he's the perfect combination of a Postecoglou midfielder, because he's a bit of a worker bee. He's very energetic, enthusiastic, aggressive in the tackle. Yet also has that really creative side to his play, the ability to play a quick through pass. And he also likes to get into attacking areas, kind of running in late. And I think at Villarreal, he was playing in a very advanced position at times last season after he came back from the injury, almost like as a support striker. And I don't think it's any coincidence he's come in for Postecoglou, scored in both the games, won a really nice volley. The game against Sailors on Wednesday night. Manor Solomon, really good work down the right. He had a bright tour. And he put in a cross that got deflected across Lo Celso. You could hear him, you could see him like shouting at Richarlison to leave it, and he just ran on and slammed it into the goal. It was a nice goal, nice finish. And yeah, for a player that's kind of been in the wilderness for 18 months, really, in terms of the Spurs wilderness, it's really interesting to see him kind of back in and amongst things, and almost like a man reborn. It's just clearly Postecoglou's really taken a liking to him from training early on, decided that he was one for him. Maybe a slight bit of fortune in the first game that it appeared, I don't know if he was going to be in the starting 11 for the second half against West Ham, because I think the way they were playing in training was that Tongi was in the first half 11, Alfie Devine was in the midfield in the second half 11, but then Tongi picked up the knock. I think it was Skippy went across to the first 11, I'm trying to remember now, and Lo Celso came into the second half 11. Manor Solomon went across to the first one because they decided Sonny wasn't quite ready yet, and then Alfie ended up playing on the right wing. But yeah, I think the Lo Celso that's returned is a bit of a different one as well. I'm not saying it's actually a different person pretending to be Giovanni Lo Celso, but just a different kind of character. The Lo Celso kind of who left in January 2022 was a bit more quiet, a bit more withdrawn from what I understand, speaking to people around Spurs. Mostly would stick amongst the Argentines. Don't forget, back then they had, maybe a bit earlier than that, but they used to have Juan Foyth, Gazaniga, obviously Romero as well. But I think the years have just kind of naturally matured him a bit. What is he, 27 now? He's become a dad. His partner gave birth to a little girl back in November last year. And people I've spoken to around Spurs, and this is like quite a few people around the club, have kind of remarked upon how he's just a much happier person, feeling a really kind of quite a smiling individual, enjoying himself, more outgoing, really eager to please. And I think all of that has kind of played its part. And, you know, Postecoglou said about getting clarity around some players, and I think maybe the fog has lifted. That was the expression he used about the fog lifting around some players. And I think that's what's happened with Lo Celso. He's seen a player that, yeah, do you know what? I like him. I like what he does. And there was a report in, I can't remember what Spanish publication it was now, but there was a report in one of the Spanish media that said that Postecoglou had already told Lo Celso that he wanted him to stay, and that, you know, not to think about going elsewhere because he wanted him to be part of his plans. So I put that to Postecoglou. I said, you know, seen some reports in Spain and suggesting you want him to stay. Is there any truth in that? So yeah, he took that as another one of his opportunities to have a little wisecrack. So he said, I'm here, mate. You don't have to go all the way to Spain. Just ask the question. So, a little laugh as he said it as well. I feel like I'm going to be on the end of a few of those this season. And then he admitted it. He said, yeah, I'm really happy with Gio. He's been really good in training. You can see he's a quality player, and I think the way we play suits him. I've enjoyed working with him, and I think he's enjoying himself in terms of the football we want to play. And yeah, it's going well. So yeah, be interesting to see now, because I think a few people probably wrote off Lo Celso, and now he could end up being a quite important part of the squad under Postecoglou. You'd imagine maybe not going to be, unless he forces himself in there, but perhaps not a starting player in that first 11. Although you never know, there could be a spot on the left of that 3, unless it depends, because if Højbjerg does go, then it depends what kind of midfielder they bring in to replace him. Still intrigued to see how high Atletico Madrid will go for Højbjerg in terms of the price, because I think Spurs will want a fair whack for him. I saw some reports suggesting that 20 million had been rejected or something, but I would imagine, yeah, you'd want more for Højbjerg. It's established Premier League midfielder, scores goals, gets assists, a couple of years left on his contract. I think you could easily look for more than 20 million for him, maybe looking 30, maybe 40 for him. And I know there's people that don't rate him, but I think if you're looking from the outside, he's, like I say, an established Premier League player. Another player who actually I felt had a really good tour, and maybe was one that I don't think some of us even expect him to be on the tour, was Ivan Perisic. He played very well in some of the games. His delivery is unquestioned. It's a terrific delivery he puts into the box, but the fact that actually as a winger, without the defensive responsibilities, it played to his strengths. As an older player, not having to get back, he was able to just concentrate on pressing. He was involved in pretty much every goal that occurred when he was on the pitch. I still get the feeling he might depart, maybe because of his wages and because of his desire to probably play. I know it would be Champions League, or maybe there's talk about him going home to Hajduk Split in Croatia. But yeah, he gave Postecoglou some little things to think about. He was really good, looked really sharp the whole time. Then he had Richarlison, the Richarlison and Kane show. It kind of was yesterday. It was good to see Sonny taking some steps back to fitness, and he looked like a player without the pain of last season, so that was good. But he's very much still a player kind of coming back into things. Richarlison and Kane, it was kind of all eyes on them, because obviously Richarlison, if Kane goes, will be one of the main options. And look, he was a £60 million signing. He's Brazil's number 9. If anyone really should, on paper, be a good candidate to at least be the centre forward in a Postecoglou system, it would be Richarlison. It's just unfortunate he had an absolute stinker of a season last year. You know, one Premier League goal is not a £60 million striker or Brazil's number 9. It shouldn't be. What I would say is, you know, he's said himself, too many injuries last season. Conte used more a different terminology for Richarlison this season. But yeah, one Premier League goal is not enough for a £60 million player. It's not good at all. And he's a funny character. He's very endearing. He's complex, emotional. Sometimes he can seem really shy. I've seen him around Hotspur Way at times, and he's very, almost seems painfully shy. But then the next moment can be really extravagant and loud. It's very, very strange. And sometimes he almost comes across a little bit childlike, and then other times very savvy and clever and quite politically aware. You'll have seen that he does a lot of campaigning for things as well. And it's almost the same on the pitch as well. He can be like this kind of antagonising, blunt instrument that just is like a bit of a battering ram, annoying the defence. And then in the next instant, can do something incredible with the ball. Can do like an amazing overhead kick, or a little skill, a little bit of a trick and a flick. And you kind of think, whoa, it's kind of two different players rolled into one. Very popular within the squad. I do still find it strange that, what is he, more than 6 years in England, his English is still like, we asked for him for an interview on the tour, and it was a bit like, yeah, he's still not really at that stage yet. I did see with Miles, he did a little interview on the pitch with Emerson very much alongside him, ready to help. I just find it quite, who knows, if I was in another country for 6 years, I might not have kind of got the language down, but yeah, he's still getting it. There's this little joke with Emerson that he's like, I speak English better than he does. I just think Emerson's English is better. I think Emerson is very close to, Emmy is very close to giving us an interview. I think we're almost there with him. And you could probably tell from his interview on the pitch that it was that little bit more confident. But when he did speak to Milesy, he said, he asked him, because obviously he scored a hat-trick. Nice little hat-trick. We were wondering at one point whether it was a perfect hat-trick, but I don't think it was. I think the two ones with his feet were with the same foot, I think. Feel free, if you're desperate to know, check back. It might not have been, but they kind of grew in confidence with each goal. And the last one, which was an Emerson flick into his path, it was a really nice dinked finish. He said afterwards to Milesy, "I'm over the moon." I love that. The amount of foreign players on this tour that have spoken to us and used the expression, "I'm over the moon." Maybe it's one of the first things they learn in football speak. "I'm over the moon. I'm so happy. Thank you, fans. Thank you, Singapore, for this pre-season. The pre-season has been good for me and the group. I'm good. I feel good. Last season I had too many injuries, and now I feel good. My body is good. I think it will be a good season for me." Good. Yeah, I mean, everyone within Spurs wants Richarlison to succeed. He's a character that gives you his all. Like I say, he's an emotional chap. Gets very upset if he's coming off the pitch and anything like that. There's quite a few within the club that obviously feel that he's probably the more natural fit for a Postecoglou system because, again, we've said this before, so sorry, this is for people that maybe haven't watched previous ones. So the central striker in Australians, his system is, it's like a sacrificial lamb, I guess, of sorts, in terms of he's going to be throwing himself into every match, pressing, harassing, making a nuisance of himself, finding pockets of space, scoring bucket loads of goals, but essentially finishing every match absolutely drained and putting everything on the line for the team. So that's not really Kane at this stage in his career. Maybe more so in the Postecoglou, Pochettino era. But Kane is probably a more all-round player. More likely to drop deep, although interestingly on the tour he was dropping deep less. I wonder, presumably that's because Maddison's behind him doing that job. He didn't need to, but I definitely noticed a more advanced Kane on this tour. And again, that may be something. Does he prefer that? Does he feel like it is resting his body a little bit more, or does he miss coming back and being the playmaker? Whereas, Richarlison, maybe that description I gave is more like him, and that's not me saying, "Sell Kane, Richarlison can rule." Absolutely not. It's just me saying that in terms of the previous systems, Richarlison fits it better. That's not to say that Kane can't make it work in incredible ways. Postecoglou was asked about the differences in between them, and he said they're different strikers, different strengths. Both, though, I think have a real presence in the penalty box, and that's why Harry's scored so many goals and why he's one of the best strikers in the world. Richie is also a presence in the box in a different way, so I think they've both got a right kind of qualities to play in that area, and I think with Richie he can also play out wide and as a second striker, mainly because he's got, and I think people dismiss it a bit, a really strong work ethic. He works hard for the team. A lot of what he does doesn't get seen. His pressing, his runs. Sometimes he doesn't get the ball, but he's always making those runs, and he's a constant nuisance of defenders, so he can play a couple of positions for sure. I can definitely tell that Postecoglou is developing a bit of an affection for Richarlison. I think you can tell that in just the way he acts and talks about him. And don't forget, this is the Richarlison who's spoken recently about getting absolutely torn apart by Conte for 2 hours in front of the squad, kind of ripping apart. And maybe Postecoglou's seen that he's the kind of guy that needs a bit of an arm around his shoulder. And when he was asked about his confidence being up with that hat-trick, he said, "I hope so. I said it before that I really like Richie. He's someone who's got all the attributes I look for in a striker, and he's got the strong work ethic. He's always in the right areas, and he's presenting himself and making a presence of himself in the right areas for the way we play." He was probably a bit unlucky not to get a couple against West Ham that night. Again, he was in the right areas today. I've got a lot of time for him, and he's one of the ones I'm looking forward to working with. From the outside, you see a player, and you try to picture how they fit into the kind of football you want to play, and I certainly think he can. Kane scored as well. Pierre-Emile, who again has been another bright spot of this tour, I feel. Postecoglou raved about him. Look back at one of my transcripts from the presser, I think it was in Thailand. He raved about him. That's a kid with a future under him this season. You can see he's definitely going to get game time. He loves his technical ability and just pretty much everything about his game. So keep an eye on Pierre-Emile under Postecoglou. When it comes to Kane, we'll just have to see what happens, really, won't we? I think there's room for both him and Richarlison absolutely at the club next season. I'm sure Postecoglou in an ideal world would want that. But we await to see what happens between Levy and Bayern Munich. Yeah. But, as it was for the final press conference, he didn't really have any Harry Kane questions for the first time. And that was because a certain 86-year-old named Joe Lewis suddenly very much became front and centre at Tottenham. So Joe Lewis is probably the most publicity-shy human being on earth. Even looking for photos in the news agency photo systems that we have, whenever I've had to write a story about Joe Lewis, it's so difficult. There's only about 4 photos of him exist, pretty much. There's a couple from a match he went to, and he was sat next to Levy years ago. There's one of him on a golf course. And where was the other one? I can't remember what the other one was, but it was 4. There's been more photos on Wednesday from New York of him coming out of the courthouse, I think it was, than there has been in the rest of his life. Which is something, when you think about it, is mad. It shows how, I guess if you're rich enough, you can keep yourself out of the public eye, I suppose. The former owner of Spurs, we must refer to him now as, and we'll discuss that in a moment. Most people just see him, I guess, as this figure of frustration, as the club don't match the amount spent by some other, or the big clubs anyway. Seen maybe as a man who spends more money on his massive art collection than he does on Spurs. He's always been kind of slightly detached from Spurs. It's a strange... He was the owner of the Tavistock Group, which owned ENIC, which owned Tottenham. So it was always this kind of strange dynamic where he wasn't a direct kind of influence, but obviously would have some. There's a lot of people that kind of around the club have been around for a long time, so it would be very rare that he would ever get involved in any kind of football decisions. It would always be left to Daniel Levy, which was why it was strange when those stories started to come out about that Joe Lewis had ordered that he had to be sold, Harry Kane. It was very strange. It didn't really fit with, I guess, the narrative that's always seemed to have come out of the club about Joe Lewis. So if you're not aware of Joe Lewis, kind of how much he's worth as well. So Forbes have him worth $6.1 billion, which is £4.7 billion. They've got him listed as the 425th richest man in the world. So if you're wondering why he's suddenly come into the public eye, if you've missed all of the storm in recent days, it's because essentially the United States Attorney's Office and FBI have pretty much declared war on Joe Lewis. Here's the exact thing. I'm going to read these out exactly to the letter because you don't want to read anything wrong out in these sort of things. He's been charged with 13 counts of securities fraud, which carry a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison each. 3 other counts of securities fraud, which carry a maximum sentence of 25 years in prison. And then 3 counts of conspiracy, each of which carries a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison. So the US Attorney Damian Williams, in this video that came out while we were all asleep in Singapore, announced, "Today I am announcing that my office, the Southern District of New York, has indicted Joe Lewis, the British billionaire, for orchestrating a brazen insider trading scheme. We allege that for years Joe Lewis abused his access to corporate boardrooms and repeatedly provided inside information to his romantic partners, his personal assistants, his private pilots and his friends. Those folks then traded on that inside information and made millions of dollars in the stock market because thanks to Lewis, those bets were a sure thing. Now, none of this was necessary. Joe Lewis is a wealthy man, but as we allege, he used inside information as a way to compensate his employees or to shower gifts on his friends and lovers. That's classic corporate corruption. It's cheating and it's against the law. Laws that apply to everyone, no matter who you are. That's why Joe Lewis has been indicted and will face justice here in the Southern District of New York." So on Wednesday, Lewis pleaded not guilty to insider trading charges in that Manhattan court. He was granted a $300 million bail, which is £230 million. Yes, Tottenham fans will probably be wondering, what a defence you could buy with that. Tottenham defence, not Joe Lewis's defence. And weirdly, not weirdly, understandably, I guess, in the meantime, Spurs have done everything possible to distance themselves from Joe Lewis. You might remember me back in October last year talking about documents that were filed with Companies House. They were filed showing that Joe Lewis was no longer to be shown as a person of significant control of Tottenham Hotspur. At the time, instead, two officers of the Lewis Family Trust were appointed in his place. The Miami-born lawyer Brian Antoine Glinton and the British-born solicitor Katie Louise Booth. Back then, as you'll have heard me saying, it was reported everywhere as well. After I'd kind of dived into all of that, it was made very clear that the move was simply a family trust restructure. It did not change anything from Spurs on a day-to-day level, as they had and continued to be owned by Lewis and the family trust and run by Levy. However, 10 months on, and the club are very much making it clear that that ended up being anything but the case. So the owner of Tottenham remains ENIC, but that majority of control is now held by a family discretionary trust, of which Lewis is not a beneficiary, although members of his family are. So I've got to get this all right the way I say this. So Spurs have made it very clear that Lewis is to be called their former owner. And a club spokesman said on Wednesday, "This is a legal matter unconnected with the club, and as such we have no comment." And obviously there's also ramifications because he's not the owner of, because he gave up control. It was October 5th last year, so he's no longer considered an owner or director under the Premier League test. So what's happening over there now in the USA has no impact anyway on the running of or the ownership structure of the club. So that's a good thing for Spurs, certainly. Whether it leads to a hastened sale of the club, it remains to be seen. It really does. Some people might say maybe the look of it and everything that's happening maybe does, but look, Spurs have never really shied away from awkward, uncomfortable situations in the past. Super League fiasco, they were kind of right in there with that, despite the very kind of different views on that from the rest of the world. And also this week, they accepted a £12.9 million bid from Spartak Moscow, the Russian club, for Davinson Sanchez. I do think they're going to be quite lucky in that Davinson, he seems to be quite reluctant to head off to Russia, which really could save Spurs from the incredibly awkward situation of agreeing to accept Russian money in the week where they've organised this event for a great cause, as playing Shakhtar Donetsk in a friendly, raising money at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium for those affected by the war in the Ukraine. Accepting Russian money, raising money for the Ukraine. Like I say, Tottenham Hotspur, it's Spurs and, how do I put this? Spurs and PR, good PR, they're very close together. They're very, very rarely bedfellows. And just on the Russian money thing. So Premier League clubs cannot stop clubs from dealing with any Russian sides, but it is believed they would strongly discourage them from making deals with any clubs from the country amid the ongoing invasion of Ukraine. Any club which does business with a Russian side must be satisfied that the club and its source of funding were not subject to any sanctions. Accepting money from any sanctioned individual is illegal. So I'm sure legally Spurs would have done it all the right way. Again, it's just the look of it would not have been great. But obviously £12.9 million for Davinson Sanchez in the last year of his contract is presumably now that's the price set. That's what Spurs will be looking at for from people. Spurs and awkward situations. They seem to follow each other. At least they have Postecoglou. Postecoglou is the steady hand on the tiller. He is the straight-talking guy in a club where people don't like to talk publicly. He's the guy that is not afraid to say stuff. And it was put to him about the Joe Lewis stuff after the game, and he said, the club's put out a statement on that, and if you think that's what I'm involved in, you don't know what my role is here. The club's put a statement out, and the press officer was trying to intervene and saying, the club's put a statement out, it's a legal matter, we're not going to comment on it. But I get the impression Postecoglou does not like having his battles fought for him. There's some managers who'd be quite happy to just go, not for me, kind of Gov, and the press officer comes in and says, no, we're not going to answer questions on that. Postecoglou doesn't like that. As soon as you'd have noticed that when the German reporter was holding up the shirt and the press officer tried to move it on, Postecoglou came back and started back at him like, you happy with that? Yeah, you got your laugh, all of that sort of stuff. If you didn't see it in the next press conference, he started it, Postecoglou, by saying, Should we get any show and tell out of the way now, shall we? He likes the little bits of humour. But yeah, when he was then asked whether his plans remained unchanged amid that Lewis news, Postecoglou said, "Why wouldn't they be?" Clubs, and he kind of gave this glare, this stare. We got to see the slightly angry Postecoglou, and he said, "The club's already said it's not a club matter. We're not putting out a statement that's not true. So if it's not a club matter, it doesn't affect me in terms of what I'm trying to do." So no one said anything like that to me. He just accepts no bull. He really doesn't. Just refuses to be part of anything that. He just doesn't suffer fools gladly, I suppose, is the English expression. Like I say, Spurs needed a very clear public voice right now at a club that very rarely has a strong public voice. It has people at the top who don't really have an interest in communicating and making clear why they make certain decisions and why they do what they do. So to have Postecoglou there, I guess, is what they need at this time. They really do. He's not like Conte, who he'd be clear about the stuff, but maybe it was more about what was best for Antonio Conte at times. The club as well, but often also Conte. Whereas with Postecoglou, you kind of feel like he's just trying to cut through all the rubbish. Look, the signings so far for him have been good that have come in terms of, I think Vicario certainly have seen on tour. Yeah, some of the goals I don't really think he had anything he could do about it. Having interviewed him, spoken to him, he's a strong, dominant character. I think he will grow into Lloris's gloves. Manor Solomon I've been really impressed with. In the flesh, is very tricky, quick, dribbling winger. Especially coming on late in games. I think he's going to terrorise defences. I think Maddison has a potential to be what Grealish could have been for Pochettino. I think he could be huge for Postecoglou. And it's quite telling that, he was the player that Pochettino never got but needed, really. Now it's about the centre-backs. He needs them. He needs them so badly. He really, really does. It's incredible that, I did that sit-down. When we did the sit-down with him, that was one of the questions I asked, was about areas he'd identified early on. And he said straight away, goalkeeper and centre-back. That was the two that he straight away saw. And here we are, Friday, July 28th. He's been at the club almost a month, and other players have been signed, and they have not signed centre-backs. Look, I get the idea that all three players signed were very much opportunities that they felt they needed to get in there before other clubs did. But come on. The centre-back stuff is mad. It really is. And it's been shown again on tour. The goals against West Ham were poor. The goal against Lion City Sailors, with no disrespect to them, but a Premier League club or defenders should not be conceding that goal to Lion City Sailors in the Singapore Premier League. Because this is the thing about the Postecoglou system. It's got such a strong attack and such an attack-tilted system that the defence at the back has to be very quick, adaptable, clever, and able to deal with what comes their way. And at the moment, it's not. It's just not at all. That's something that needs to be sorted out really quickly. Look, the Kane situation needs a resolution. Of course it does. One way or the other. Levy can't allow it to end up affecting not only Kane, but also Postecoglou and the squad. It can't just be this ongoing dominating topic. I saw quite amusingly that one of the German kind of media was saying something like, Bayern are going to set a deadline. Like, what? What are you setting a deadline for? It should be Spurs. Everything about the way Bayern has kind of gone about this, or certainly some of the reporting, to be fair, but also some of the quotes that come out of the club, have been the wrong way round. It's like, Spurs must give us an asking price for Kane. I don't know why they're talking like old English gentlemen. No, they don't. Spurs don't have to give an asking price if they don't want to. Spurs have to sell him to us. No, they don't if they don't want to. We will set a deadline. Set a deadline for what? It's just mad the way that this has all come and gone. Well, hopefully it will be gone. So Spurs have to decide if they're going to sell him, set a price and a deadline. Bayern have to meet that. Both of those. You get it in before the deadline and you get the price that we want. If they decide they don't want to sell him, then make that very clear. we don't want to sell one of the world's best strikers because we're better with him than we are without him. And you go and you decide that, and you stick to it if that's what you're going to go for. Make it very clear out there. It'd be lovely to have a statement from Daniel Levy. Because look, from what we understand about Kane, he's not going to kick up a fuss, try and kick his way out of the club, kick the door down. Like I said earlier, he will look at all the options available to him, and he will decide based on the decisions that are kind of made for him. Because like I say, next summer and technically in January, he'll be able to decide his own future, and it won't be up to anyone else. Whatever happens, through the noise and everything that's going on right now, and the drama in America now that's added to everything. Although, as Spurs state, former owner, nothing to do with the club. They just need to cut through it all. And they need to, let's be honest, get behind a manager who's got the ability to bring... I've seen it on the tour. I've seen it firsthand. I've been there. I've seen him bring that squad together that was starting to really fracture. Well, Romero said it. There was this split in the camp. I think Ryan Mason, he'll get flack, but Ryan Mason started to bring that squad back together. And I feel like Postecoglou has Postecoglou'd it all together again. And they're a very, very happy squad. And he is also, for me, the man that can Postecoglou, I'm going to overuse that, the fans and the club back together again. But he needs to be not fighting a losing or battling against a losing wicket the whole time, to use a bit of a topical cricket reference. He needs to have that backing. How many times have we said that? And if that means spending the money to get in a Van der Ven, if that means spending even more money to get in a Tapsoba, I know I saw Bayer Leverkusen kind of very much set their stance there, but is that a stance of just, well, that's because we want a certain amount for him? If that is to bring in one of them plus an Adarabioyo or another data-driven signing, there's probably going to be more that come out of the woodwork in the coming days to either try and force a deal through for the others or just, go for someone else who actually was also on the list and highly thought of. You would think Van der Ven, I know it hasn't got anywhere recently, but you'd think he would be someone that stuff would start to advance for, because surely the fee is more gettable. And again, it's about backing your manager. If you feel that he's the perfect fit for a Postecoglou team, then go and get him. Even Adarabioyo, from what I understand, I wrote it in my talking points yesterday, I understand there's been bids made for Adarabioyo by other interested clubs, but not at the point when I wrote those by Spurs. So Spurs have shown a lot of interest in him, homegrown player, the Fulham defender, but they might end up losing him if they don't decide to act and make a move for him. I don't know whether it's about timing. Do they think that fans would see him as the main signing if they went for him first, rather than that would be a kind of like a +1, still an important part of defence, but maybe they want to prioritise the money towards the main central defender. I don't know, but then they end up potentially losing out on him, and then maybe that's when they have to turn to a Longley type. So, look, if they back Postecoglou, Spurs fans could actually enjoy this season. They could have a bit of a smile about it, but ultimately, they've got to make Postecoglou happy. How many times have we seen managers at Spurs look beaten down and weary? I spoke about it at the top of this, the 2019 tour. I saw Postecoglou, Pochettino. It's similar names when you say it quickly. I saw Pochettino look battered and beaten and weary. And that was after a summer off after Champions League final. He looked knackered. And we've seen so many of them. We've seen Conte kind of finish that way as well. They need to make Postecoglou happy in the job and smiling. And they can't kind of ruin him so early on with all the crazy carnage that goes on around Spurs. Because when I asked him about whether he was frustrated about the centre-backs and not having them, despite having identified that so early in the process, because it wouldn't even be from the day he started, it would have been the weeks before when he was first appointed and in those early discussions about the team, by the sounds of it. So when I asked him that question, he made that little great quip about how he wished buying them was like his wife buying stuff on Amazon, because there seemed to be deliveries every day to the Postecoglou household. The doorbell's always ringing with another delivery that his wife's ordered. That was what he was saying. now it's Daniel Levy who needs to deliver. He needs to be the delivery man to the Postecoglou, not household. That'd be weird if he turned up suddenly with a centre-back there, but we wouldn't say no just to get a centre-back in. It's got to deliver. How many times have we said that? But that has to be the priority now. They have to find money from somewhere. And looking at, I'm just going to double check right now, but certainly on Company's House, it'd be great if it had just happened. But let me just double check because I want to say, yeah, as of now, Spurs have still not drawn that other £50 million from that ENIC had put up was it a capital share increase? I can't remember the exact term. Bring that £50 million in, that might buy you a Van der Ven and maybe even a tap sober. But look, I don't manage money and I don't understand the way it all works. But you got that 50 million to bring in and you desperately need a centre-back. And Postecoglou said he wants them before the start of the season. Why don't you do it? I don't get it. Oh, I've got so tired as this has gone. I'm getting more and more like, I'm quite impressed that I haven't. I was writing on the plane. For me, it was last night. For you guys, it was kind of the middle of yesterday. And I genuinely was falling asleep at my laptop trying to write the stuff. Not because it was boring, because it was just so late at night for me. Like even now, I'm recording this at just before 7 o'clock at night. For me, my body clock, that is 2 in the morning. It's just mad. But there you go. Right, so I'm going to head off now. 1 hour 40. I think this is now my longest video. I do apologise. Those who are desperate for me to do 10, 20-minute videos, not many to be fair, but sometimes people pop up and say that. That's not what I do. It's not what I do. Hopefully, anyone can realise the amount of stuff we've covered and hopefully the detail that we've covered these things in. I'm not the guy to bring you 10, 20-minute videos. There are many people that can do that, talking about reports they've seen other people's stuff. That's not really what I'm about. It's about what I see, what I write about, what I know, and it's in this long form way of doing it. But yeah, so sorry if you've fallen asleep by the end of this. Like I say, I'm off now until the Shakhtar game, which means stuff will happen. Hopefully it means Harry Kane staying, Bayern going away crying from their meeting. That sounds really harsh. Bayern not happy and going and being told he's not with Zale. A new defender or two coming in. I would be very happy if all of that happens. I would, of course, jump back on and do a video or two if that does happen. But otherwise, I'm just going to try and relax and enjoy some time with the family. And then we've got, the games in quick succession against Shakhtar and then Barcelona. I think I'm going out to that one as well, which I'm really looking forward to. It actually coincides, it's the day before my birthday, so I'm going to maybe pop out to Barcelona and spend a day or two there for my birthday as a bit of a double bubble. But yeah, time to head off. Let's see what happens. It's Tottenham. Anything could be around the corner. I wasn't expecting half of the stuff that suddenly cropped up. I wasn't expecting a German to suddenly hold up his shirt and go, looks good, no? I wasn't expecting Joe Lewis to suddenly be the most photographed man in Manhattan. I wasn't expecting loads of the stuff that happened on that tour. So let's see what the next week brings. Yes, I'm going to head off now. So as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.